Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's talk, The Popularity of Amy Ignatow. My name is Christopher Brown. I am the curator for the Children's Literature Research Collection, and I am lucky enough to be joined by children's book author, illustrator, Grease 2 mega fan, Amy Ignatow, the author and illustrator of the Popularity paper series, the Mighty Odds series, the Tales of Christina Starspeeder, which are part of the Jedi Academy series. I think it's 7 through 9, if I am correct. And the picture book, The Cutest Thing Ever. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hi, how
So,
are you?
I'm good, thank you. Before we get into our conversation, I have a small amount of housekeeping to do, so please bear with me. This presentation is brought to you by the Children's Literature Research Collection, which is part of the Special Collections Division of the Free Library of Philadelphia. The Free Library of Philadelphia's Children's Literature Research Collection is one of the premier centers for the study of children's literature in the United States. CLRC, as we affectionately call it, engages the public about the importance of children's literature in our culture and our society. We expand the knowledge base of our patrons through research support, and we foster new ideas through displays and exhibitions. You can learn more about the collection by visiting us on the web at freelibrary.org/CLRC. And you can see past programs as well as activities, games, and a bunch of other fun stuff in our special collections repository, which is located at bit.ly/fun with FLP spec call. Don't worry, I'll put these links into chat. You don't have to copy them down now. And you can learn more about all of our special collections online at freelibrary.org/special collections. We have some great ongoing exhibitions currently. The first one is Up Above, Thinking About the Skies. The dream of flying through the skies, looking down with a bird's eye view, has captivated people for centuries. After mythological tales and folklore encouraged humankind to consider the science of flight, the skyways opened new adventures for communications and travel. Hot air balloons were used for spectacle, sport, and to see our world from a different angle. Advanced air travel fundamentally altered our ability to communicate as mail crisscrossed the skies and people traveled for business and for leisure. Learn more about this in the exhibition Up Above, Thinking About the Skies, on view through May 23rd, 2020 at Parkway Central Library. And the William B. Dietrich Gallery on the 3rd floor of Parkway Central Library is hosting an exhibition curated by Philadelphians from around the city. It includes one-of-a-kind artifacts from 1,000 years of Muslim culture, alongside treasures and ephemera from the homes of Philadelphia Muslims. In the Path of Islam is a place to share the stories of Islam and to celebrate Philadelphia as a center for Black American Muslims. The exhibition will be complemented with a traveling exhibition showing off the Free Library's largest Quran, as well as a collection of indigenous Muslim dolls designed here in Philadelphia, as well as ancient and modern Arabic calligraphy. And that is going to be on view at Parkway Central Library on the 3rd floor through July 29th. Okay, so I think that I have gotten through all of our housekeeping. Thank you for bearing with me. And now on to the fun part. Amy Ignatow's work has been lauded by critics and readers alike, with Kirkus reviews calling the Popularity papers alternatively poignant and uproarious, a satisfying addition to the tween genre. They also called the Mighty Odds hilarious and revealing. This book is a must-have, and I've added the fist pound, but I think it was implied in the reviews. In February, what was it?
Oh, I said always.
Always, yeah. And in February, Variety announced that the Popularity papers is being adapted for, I want to say television, but I feel like that's an outdated term. It's being updated, it's being produced for a live adaptation. We'll put it that way. You can watch it on your computer, on your tablet, wherever. Amy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I just wanted to, in regards to housekeeping, did I see a Monica Carnisi illustration in there? I think I did. So I was very excited.
She designed our logo for us.
It's super cute.
And she did it all for, I think, the price of a large batch of French fries because she loves them so much.
Okay. I need to have a talk with her. Value your work, Monica. But also French fries are delicious, so I get it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful and humbling introduction. Now I have to live up to it. I'm going to do some screen sharing and then I'm gonna get into my little talk and just sort of talk about how I got here. And after that, I'll take questions. So
Sounds great.
I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna be technically flawless. It's gonna be amazing. And
There
here
we go.
we go. Can we all see what we're seeing here? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's
You're
me.
good.
Do myself. All right. So when I talk to people, either in school visits or library visits, or on private jets, which I do quite often, as you can well imagine, in my line of work, and yachts and whatnot, there's always a couple of questions that everyone asks during the question and answer period. So I figured I would just answer them now so that we could get to, like, other questions that are, stump me. And this is something that questions that a lot of people ask a lot of authors, and they're kind of, some of them are harder to answer than others. So number one is, what inspires you? So that's, we'll go over that. Number two, when did you start writing? And number three, how long did it take to write a book? So moving on. So this is from, I believe, a 1988, in Flower Hill Elementary School in New York, where I spent my youth. And we all had to write letters, nice letters to each other, and then the teachers made books of these letters. And so I looked at them, and Jonathan Marcella had this to say: "To Amy, you are good at drawing and you read a lot." Nailed it. Totally nailed it. He got it. He got me in 1988. So so it's like, when did you start writing? Well, and drawing, it's been going on a long time. My picture proves my evidence. Moving on to middle school. This is from my middle school yearbook. "You are the weirdest person I've ever met. I guess that's what makes you so special. Yo, so special. See ya, Leslie." I don't know who Leslie is. I never saw her again. I have no idea. But once again, okay, cool. Thank you for writing that. I don't want to nitpick your spelling of things because you're in, like, probably 8th grade. But so the question is, have you always been this way? Yes, I have. And that's what makes me so special. All right, so I get to high school. And in high school, I went to Huntington High School in Huntington on Long Island in New York. And we did not have, for a couple of years, a school publication. And the reason for this is that we had an austerity budget, which was a really terrible thing. So a lot of our extracurriculars, sports, newer teachers, all went away. They closed 75% of the school's bathrooms. I'm still outraged about this. So we all have lasting kidney damage from high school. And so in response, a friend and I decided to create the unbelievably ridiculously named The Apothecary. Like, it's so officious, and I feel no shame, because that's who you are as a teenager. You're going to do stuff that you think is super important, and it is at the time. And so we wrote and we put together the zine every 2 weeks for 2 years. We put together this zine and we distributed it. It was funded by the taxpayers of Huntington, New York, because my friend's mom was a librarian and let us use the photocopy machine for free. So I learned at a pretty young age that librarians are rad, and they know what to do with state and city resources. They get it. And we handed these things out. And of course, they were very busy and very silly. And it was just us cutting up magazines. This is what you did in the 90s for fun. And just terrible poetry and awful, too much design and just lifting stuff off of magazines. And sorry about that. And but it taught me so much. First of all, just because something doesn't exist doesn't mean that you can't make it exist. There was no outlet, no school newspaper, no art magazine, nothing like that. And this is, of course, before websites. So we just made our own. And that, to me, that's sort of a theme that you'll see running throughout this and my life in general. If something doesn't exist, you will it into existence if that's something that you want enough. And I wanted a place to put my drawings and a place to share, my terrible writing. And this is how we started. So I got to my first college, which was a state college in upstate New York. And one of the first things that I did, I remember my sophomore year, I was reading the school newspaper up there, and there was this humor column, and I read it in the first week of school, and I said, "This is not funny. If you're going to have a humor column, it should be funny." And I'm funny, and this guy isn't funny. So I wrote a letter to the newspaper, and I said, "He's not funny. I am. This is my first column. There's more where this came from." He was like one of the editors. I didn't know that, but he was very cool about it. He's like, "Yeah, you are funny." So for for another year while I was there, I wrote this column once a week, and I actually won awards for it. So that was very cool to have that. But again, it sort of taught me that discipline of like, number one, if something is not good and you think you can do it better, then try. Don't just complain about it. And number two, to keep a deadline, to keep, having to crank out a column once a week is something. So moving right along, I left that college, and then I went to art school in Philadelphia, Moore College of Art and Design. And I got there, and they didn't have a school publication. This is a very tiny college. And that bothered me because I wanted to draw cartoons. And so when again, sophomore year, I just started putting up a cartoon in the hallways around the school anonymously because I was dramatic, once a week. And I did that for 3 years. And it got better. It started off like super, super, super crowded and too many words. And I learned and I learned and I learned and I learned how to do a cartoon by doing this. And it was really fun to do it anonymously. Nobody knew who it was at first, who was doing it. So I got to just, be in the elevator and listen to people discuss it and talk about how it was a senior who was doing it and not, me, this college sophomore. That was super fun. And I sent up the teachers, the professors, and they loved it. They loved just being in, anyone who was featured in that week's cartoon was thrilled. And once again, so you see this theme of like getting something done, making something happen where there wasn't anything before, and getting it done once a week. So I graduated. Oh no, before I graduated, sorry, got ahead of myself. And then after about a year, everyone kind of knew who it was. And I said, well, this is fun, and I'm getting some attention for it, but I have other classmates who also want to publish their work. We need funding for a school, like a student-run art magazine at this art school that I went to. And so where do we get that funding? I went to the administration. I said, look, I've been doing this cartoon that you guys love for a year now. Give me some funding. And they were like, okay. So we put out More Magazine once a semester for another 2 years. And as far as I know, like it went on after I graduated. They started doing it once a year and making it bigger. And we featured, our friends, and we featured their artwork, and we handed them out. And this is, again, like websites were only starting to become more accessible. So my classmates could take this to galleries and potential employers and say, look, I've been published. I've been published by Amy Ignatow. It's a very big deal. So we got to put our art out there because I believe very deeply in publishing and in sharing the work that you have and not making artwork in a vacuum. All right, so got out of college and I started my own website, which no longer is in existence, so don't look for it. And I started a comic, a weekly comic called Ig City, and it was just about my life in Philadelphia as a 20-something goofball, and all of the different, just the ridiculousness of one's 20s. That was this. And that's the reason I took it down, because now I have a bunch of children reading my work and they don't need to see what I did in my 20s. So so I did this and I got like a little bit of a following. And that is also how I got my literary agent and his attention. Once again, this was all like, no one's paying me for this stuff. This is just self-published, the deadlines that I was on the deadlines were ones that I made myself. Because if something doesn't exist, you can always just will it into existence. All right, so that got me a literary agent. And I feel bad. I should have warned you guys before this. At the time that my first book was published, I had bangs, and I'm sorry that I did not warn you all before this picture showed up. This is the actual picture of me looking at my first advanced reading copy of my first book for the first time. So absolutely, that's the look that one gets on your face, apparently. Just very, extremely happy. I mean, the bangs are okay, but they weren't great. They weren't, I have curly hair. It's a real risk. Take risks. So I got this literary agent through Ig City, and he was the one who suggested that I start writing for children as opposed to 20-somethings, because he said, you're very immature. And I was like, that's true. So, and then we published my first book, which was the Popularity Papers, Research for the Social Improvement and General Betterment of Lydia Goldblatt and Julie Graham-Chang. I thought I was funny when I came up with that title. We thought it was great. I did not realize how many times I would have to type it in my life. It's a lot. So there you go. That's the first book. And I got a 2-book deal the first time around. And then, so that was the second book. And then they were like, keep writing these Popularity Papers books. Do you want bangs? Putting this untitled poll away. I do like bangs, but the upkeep is too much. And then this was the fourth book, because these 2 characters go on a road trip, and then they have a band, and that's the 5th book. And then they deal with tween love, and that's the 6th book. And then it ended all up with the 7th book rather. And then time for something new. So I wrote The Mighty Odds. This was more heavy on the text, and this was a trilogy. This was number 1. And this one is about 4 kids who get into an accident. They're unrelated to each other, and discover that they have like pretty mediocre powers, so not superpowers. And then that's the 2nd book in the series. And the 3rd, and then we're gonna, so here I have these 10 books that I've done, and I get a call from Jared Krasaska, who is the author of the Lunch Lady series, of the award-winning Hey Kiddo, and a ton of other books. And I had met him at conferences, and we'd always gotten along, and he said, well, he called me. And so this is what the call looked like. He was just like, Amy, would you be interested in working with me on the next series of Jedi Academy books? He said, I've written 3, they want me to write another 3, but it's with the female character, and I feel like it should have a female voice because he's an ally. And he said, I think you could do it better than I can, and I think you should do it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to write, somebody else's work. I don't know if I want to do all this research into Star Wars. And he was just like, do it. Oh, wow. That's true. I had originally 7 more pictures of us talking to things that are not phones. Anyway, so I agreed to do it. And that turned into Jedi Academy, Revenge of the Sith. They're big on puns in this series. There's Christina Starspeeder's story. And then we had the 2nd one. And then the 3rd one, we were so excited. We're like, it's coming out. And we're going to have this big publicity tour because it's the last one in the series. And then, womp womp, COVID. So this is the last one. And then I also, just for funsies, did a picture book, which I did not illustrate. And so that was the cutest thing ever. So this has been my journey. So if you see that there's some, I think I can stop screen sharing now. Oh, there's a button. Stop share. Hi, everyone. All right. So, so the themes are what inspires you? When did you start? What inspires me is pretty much everything. That's and my friendships with people. And I'm often inspired by, is something not there? Can I put it there? Can I make it happen? And then I do. So that is that part. Does anyone have any questions for me?
While we're waiting for questions to come in, I have a lot of questions for you. But first,
Sure.
I think the most important thing we need to lead with is that of audience attendance, 100% of the people liked the bangs. So I think clearly it's a sign.
So I need to cut bangs again?
You need to go back to bangs. We will live record it, and it'll become a web adventures.
Oh
No,
no.
that's a terrible idea. But
Oh man, I'm not gonna do it.
in preparing for the
Eventually I'll do
conversation,
it.
in preparing for today, one of the things that I had the great joy of doing, which I have not done for a very long time, was I got to reread the entire Popularity papers again from beginning to end.
What
And
are they about? I don't remember.
so many things. They're about so many things that were unexpected, that it's surprisingly complex. But my first question about them is, I noticed, and this is nothing that occurred to me, when you had Julia and Lydia writing back and forth. Lydia is writing in cursive the entire time. In subsequent editions, is that something that you think you're going to need to change because kids aren't learning cursive anymore?
It was a real. It's so funny because it was happening as cursive was being phased out as the series was progressing. But I don't think they're going to change. And what's interesting is that my daughter, I didn't want, when people say, what age are these books for? I usually start with 8, or I used to start with 8. When my daughter was 7, she started reading them. She's a voracious reader. I mean, it's genetic, it's the environment. And she forced herself to learn cursive. So I thought that the cursive would be like the thing that would stop a 7-year-old from reading it, so that they wouldn't read, because it is about popularity, and that's something that you don't necessarily want kids thinking about too early. But she read them. She forced herself to learn. I think a lot of kids do. That's sort of interesting. I know that in other editions where they had to change all of the writing for the foreign editions, sometimes there's no cursive, and sometimes it's like in Korean, and I can't tell.
Right. No, that makes sense. We have
but in the future, I would not do that again. I will tell you that. But I'm kind of glad I did. But
I love it. And you say they're about popularity, but I mean, they're really complex. You threw a lot of heavy stuff at readers when Lydia goes off to visit her father, and you see her sister's reaction with that, or the relationship between Papa Daddy and Daddy and the grandparents when they're in St. Louis. There were some heavy moments you threw at kids, and I think for the benefit of the series that you didn't resolve them. Things weren't resolved easily in the book. I won't spoil things for people who have yet to find them. But
no, I mean, remind me what happened, Chris, because I don't remember.
I do know that you have no memory for it. How long does it stay in your brain before it disappears completely?
It stays in my brain until I'm working on the next thing, and then that's all I can think about. So it's out. But I do. I mean, my work. I think that to make children's books, you have to remember that kids are part of the real world, and they have their own, meshugas happening all the time, and that when there's family strife, when there's friendship strife, when there's societal strife, or any kind of issues, you don't have to make an issue book, but to have them in the stories makes them more realistic and more relatable. And if it's like the same thing, if a kid is not relating to Lydia's parents being divorced and the sort of messiness that exists in that, well, then maybe that kid can appreciate when another kid is in that situation. I just think that's I love mess. I do. I'm like Marie Kondo. I just love mess.
we have an audience question I want to throw in. If you have a favorite tool or medium when you're creating drawings.
An axe. No. I'm like a very big fan. I'm an impatient artist, and so I'm a very big fan of mediums that dry quickly, which is strange that I should work on the computer more, but I like the tactile feeling of working pen and paper, but I like ink. And I also like watercolor. I love using watercolor because it's not I cannot use oils. They make me so deeply unhappy. I'm like, why are you still messy? Why are you so messy, oils? So I do like pen and ink mostly.
That's a good answer. Will you I'm going to jump back to the Popularity Papers and pull into the Mighty Odds, because the Popularity Papers was very complex. And then with the Mighty Odds series, I think you went even further, because I would say that there were elements of the main characters, specifically Cookie and Fashad, that were almost, they were unlikable. You know, they had elements where they seemed like real people, where, you know, Cookie was behind the rumor that Farshad was a terrorist, and he did not really, I mean, I think they came to a grudging forgiveness as the series went on, but they never had that conversation where it was like, you hurt me, now I forgive you, now we're friends.
Right.
And how difficult was that to push through when you were doing the story? Did readers or editors really want something that was a little bit more tied up in a neat little bow?
Well, the cool thing about working with the editors that I've worked with is that I worked with the two editors who worked on that series were the same two editor and the publisher who I worked on with the Popularity Papers, and they kind of get it. Like, I don't believe in wrapping things up in like a nice bow, not because I'm so like cool, because I mean I'm just cool for other reasons, but but like I don't, because that's not how it goes. You know, I recently had an argument with a friend, and did we talk about it afterwards? No. Like, should we have? Maybe. Do we have the wherewithal to do that? Probably not. No. Like, these things, they don't. Sometimes you just are like, okay, let's move on. I also believe deeply that if you're going to write a character who is a racial or religious minority, and you are not that racial or religious minority, especially, that you have to take care, and this is with all characters, of course, but like, especially in these circumstances, you have to take care to not make them like the magical Negro, like, oh, this is this you know, Black character who's just perfect in every way and totally unrelatable and like up on a pedestal. And the same holds true with Farshad. Not, you know, you want to make them real characters. You want to make them believable. And sometimes that means they're unlikable, or they do things that you're just like, cringe, why are you doing this? Because people do messed up stuff, you know, and they have their reasons of self-preservation, you know, of, you know, whatever feels right to them at the time, and then it nags at them, and that is how you create a character. I think a lot of sort of people who are trying to write for children are afraid of upsetting kids, or upsetting their readers by making things sort of a little more crisp and clear and palatable, and like, they're still lovely characters, like it's not that dark, but to have them have these imperfections makes everything, to me, more real.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I realized that I don't remember when the Mighty Odds originally came out. It's been a few years, but
Yeah,
it, that
no,
somewhere in there.
earlier.
But recently we've been having a lot of conversations nationally about the conversations that minorities have that are not as well known. And it struck me that, you know, Cookie in the book as being the only Black child in this small town, when there's a scene where they're pulled over by the police, and she discusses having the talk with her parents of how you need to behave to be safe. And she very quietly relates that to Abe, the Amish character, to get these characters out of a bad situation. What kind of research did you have to do to write these minority characters and write them authentically?
Well, I hope they're authentic. So I'm not going to be like so authentic, but I hope they are, and I hope they're relatable. To me, the most important thing, and you hear this again and again, that to do it in practice is not as easy, is just to listen. And so I follow, first of all, I listen to my friends who, you know, are of all ages and walks of life, even when those conversations get uncomfortable, especially when those conversations get uncomfortable. If you're having uncomfortable conversations with people who have been through things that you do not relate to, and they are taking the time to educate you and allow you to see and learn about their experiences, that is a privilege, and you listen to it. And I also do the research and follow Black thinkers, minorities on social media, and read the books. You read it, you think about it, and it becomes part of your life. So that when I see a traffic stop and I'm driving by, I always look. I'm like, who are they pulling over? Like, and is what they have been telling me, is what I have been reading true? And yes, yes, it is. And so the thing, I think, is you just can't avert your eyes to this stuff. And if it's affecting adults, it's affecting children, right? And then in addition to writing about these things, I also speak with my own kids about these things, my nice white kids who are learning, like, guess what? When we are pulled over by a police officer, it is a very different experience. So to be able to put that into a book and to address it, I think is, in a very minor way. It's not a huge plot point. It's not, a major turning point. That's not what the book is about. But to be able to put it in, that is a writer's privilege. And so if you have the ability to do that, and it enhances the story and enhances your understanding of the character, then absolutely do it.
Right. I think that's great advice. Have you gotten good feedback from readers about situations like that? I mean,
It's so funny, like, people, I think, because I think I put all of these, issues or whatever in my books, but people rarely remark upon them, which is my preference. I think that just to have it, like, smoothly integrated into the story itself is like a really, it's an important thing to do, that it doesn't stick out. And so then that seeps into the reader's mind. So either you have a reader who's relating to it, or a reader who's just like, huh. And then when they hear about it again happening, they're like, I've heard about this before. This is not a surprise to me. Right.
I'm going to switch tracks now from something very, very heavy and ask you, what is the cutest thing ever?
You. No.
Oh, very, very sweet.
What is the cutest thing ever? Oh, puppies and toes, and little baby toes, and I don't know.
I don't think any of those things were actually mentioned in the picture book itself.
I think it's subjective, I really do. I don't know why. I think it's like adorable when my children taste something they don't like. I think that's really funny.
Your children were older when this came out, so they weren't the target demographic for this picture book. I always think that skews a little bit younger. What brought about the idea to suddenly change from doing middle grade and all of a sudden do a picture book?
Well, I had that picture book was just an idea that popped into my head, probably because, like, there used to be like that website, like Cute Overload, where it was just cute stuff. And I just thought of, like, what's cute? What's cuter? It was just like a throwaway, idea. And then I got the contract for the third Mighty Odds book, and then they kind of like, and we got this picture book that she did too, and they threw it in there. It was kind of just thrown in. I have like a bunch of other picture book kind of ideas, but picture books to me are very difficult to write, so I don't spend a lot of time on them. I have another one coming out, and I should know when. I think in the fall, and that was sort of more of a commissioned. I was asked to do it about the Symphony for a Broken Orchestra, which is a very cool story, which you can read when it comes out. And so that picture book is coming out, but it's a very different mindset, and I have a huge respect for people who can do it well. Are
you going to be illustrating the next one, or are you?
No. It's done. It's illustrated by this nice lady in England, and Gwen Millward, and she. But because the book takes place in Philadelphia, and she's never been here, in January of 2020, I was freezing cold day, and my son had off from, I think, daycare at the time, and I just put him in the car and we drove around Philadelphia taking photos of, like, photo references for her. So we took all these pictures, and then I had an unusual, which I do now with the picture books, because of my background in art, I had an unusual amount of influence in the art, which I think most picture book writers don't have as much of a say. But there was a picture that she had put of someone getting pretzels from a pretzel stand, and the pretzels were like these German pretzels, but not Philadelphia pretzels. And I was like, oh, guys, I know this is gonna, I hate to make you redraw this, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but we're going to get talk back from this if you don't make these pretzels the right shape. And honestly, I don't know how many people who are listening in are like from Philly, but I mean, I think this cute little pretzel stand that you have, which is like this little cart with like a little, canopy over it. I'm like, it really needs to be a shopping cart on the side of a highway with boxes of fresh pretzels. They're like, we're not drawing that. I was like, okay, fine, but you have to change the shape of the pretzels. And I sent them like a ton of examples of what it should look like, this sort of squashed figure eight, because that is what the Philadelphians love, and we are an opinionated people.
I remember when the city monopolies came out maybe like 10, 15 years ago, and they were selling them in some store in Suburban Station. And if you were waiting for a train, the only thing you would hear repeatedly was the Philadelphiaopoly or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Was one of the tokens was a pretzel, but it was the wrong pretzel. And every third person walking past that stand had to let someone around them know if they were with them or not. Just being like, see that pretzel? It's wrong.
This is an outrage. I'm like, and they're like, do we really need to change it? And I was just like, you guys, like, have you seen our Super Bowl parade? Like, yeah, you need to change it. We're an unhinged people.
People are going to be climbing telephone poles, rioting over this.
Like, come on.
In terms of the career overall, though, so Ig City was online. It is no longer online. You're publishing all ages. Is it something you'd ever consider revisiting and putting out, like an older graphic novel of the material?
No. I mean, I would in the future like think about sort of revisiting some of the storylines from it, but to me, it's all like, it was practice. All of that before the first book was all just me figuring stuff out. And so I think that the process of figuring stuff out is really interesting, but I don't think that it's I don't think you need to read the whole thing because there's good and bad. I would have to be heavily edited, but I like looking forward. I don't like sort of thinking back, because I know so much more now about process, about storytelling, about audience and all of that, to want to go back to that. I think there are some things that you can only write when you're in your 20s, and they should stay there. Like, bang.
I like the idea of promoting the idea of practice. I think so many times you talk to people who are new in the industry or wanting to start out in the industry, and I hear this a lot at the library. There's the assumption that you're starting a book and you start with page 1 and you write page 1 and you illustrate page 1 and you go on and you do page 2 and page 3 and so on and so forth down the line. So it is good to always promote practice.
It's building blocks. It's I could not have, I think, doing that first zine, the apothecary, I think it's without that, I would not have understood the practice of getting things on a deadline. We did it once every 2 weeks in high school. Like, that's crazy. Like, to do that, I had other stuff going on. I had to be in the school musicals, and funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Wasn't just going to act itself, but I was still there in rehearsal, gluing stuff to pieces of paper, getting ready to head over to the library to get my 300 free copies. And you learn so much from that repetition. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but it certainly helps to have that sort of, make it like a regular job, make it like a thing that you just do all the time.
That brings me back to a point about the popularity papers for people who may not be familiar. The pages are handwritten into, sometimes there's some added characters who add a note in here or there throughout the series, but you have
Yeah.
two very strong voices, two different handwriting styles, and then one of the characters is illustrating along the way because she loves to draw. How many times were you rewriting or re-illustrating these pages to make the story?
I got real good at Photoshop because I mean everything was done in Photoshop. Everything. I mean, I would draw the things because I wanted it to look like as much like kids drew it as possible. Although you'll see that the drawings get increasingly better because I went to art school, so I was just like, Julie just became a much better artist. Like I can't do, I want to do more with it. But whenever there was a mistake, I was the one, including spelling, because it was all handwritten. That was really embarrassing. I was the one who had to, put all of the spelling right, to make everything right, to get rid of all the smudges, to get rid of, and then also sometimes to just take out whole entire characters. I remember in the second book, there was like a whole character, and my editor was like, you've got like seven good, that's always my problem with more characters. She's like, you've got 7 gajillion characters. These 2 characters could be morphed together. I'm like, but I love them. She's like, but you don't need them. So they got morphed together. And so there are whole characters that have just been photoshopped out of whole pages. And then, there was
impressive.
one whole scene, and my agent has the original page. There's a bunch of women working on this, and he took a look at it, and he's just like, the way that Julie is holding that pen in the bathroom is not okay. And you realize that it was like not kosher for children the way that I had accidentally drawn it. I had to Photoshop that whole thing so that she was holding it at an angle and not at her waist level.
Which once again goes back to the point of it's good to talk to a lot of people and get a lot of perspectives on how something needs to look. By the way, while we've been talking, I've noticed that behind your shoulder you have the 4 superheroes from the Mighty Odds hanging out. Yeah. And I before we get into the questions we hate, I need to ask, when you were developing the characters, they have such unusual and specific abilities that start out as being, I'm going to say, pretty lame. Nick can teleport, but only 4 inches to his left. And Cookie can read minds, but only if people are thinking about directions. And they've slowly, as the series goes on, and they have them, their ability to expand. But where did the original impetus for that come from?
I wish I could say that I had. So usually I just write the story and the deep thoughts come later. I'm like, oh, that's what I was writing about. I don't go into it being like, I'm going to write an allegory about puberty. But I mean, that's what it was. Way before Turning Red, which is a great movie that absolutely everyone should see. But, when you're 12 years old, all of a sudden you have more responsibilities and more abilities, and you don't necessarily know how to use them. And to me, I was just thinking like the usual abilities, right? Then you think about like, what would your superhero power be? Would you rather fly, or would you rather have invisibility or teleportation or the transmogrification? Like what do you want your ability to be? So I made like a list of those abilities, the sort of stereotypical superhero stuff. And then I'm like, now how can I make it terrible and more of a burden than an actual help? And I'm like, yeah, if you have super strength but only in your thumbs, like you're just gonna break cell phones, and like how is that helpful, right? And I think that when you're going through puberty, you have some new abilities, and you're like, how is this helpful? This thing that is happening to me. So that's where that came from.
That's a great look behind the curtain. Did you ever narrow down what Martinez's abilities were? The characters never found out what her specific powers were, but there were a lot of hints along the way as to what she could do.
I think her specific powers, like spoiler alert, was to see things that other people didn't see. And so then you see that in her artwork, you see that in the way that she can see the invisible character. You see that, so she has, because she's quiet and she's strange and contemplative, and she's always been on the outside looking in as a sort of a foreigner. And that's her ability, is to see what other people can't, because they're too involved in their own stuff, because whatever. And I think we all have that one friend, at least, who's just like quietly observant. And so it manifested itself as like, you know, oh, her eyes are changing colors. Well, not really. Like, they are, but it's not because she can change her appearance. It's because she's seeing things that aren't really as obvious to everyone else.
As I was going through the series, I kept trying to figure out if I could track what her eye color meant as she was looking at it, and I couldn't do it.
Not that deep.
Okay.
No, I'm not that deep. I think in retrospect, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have had like more of a.
I'm expecting you to pull out like a huge wheel that has, you know, the color, and this is like internal strife, and this is,
In my defense, I had some like babies when I was writing those books, so like that's my. So tired.
It still holds. It's a fantastic series. For people who are watching now or watching later on YouTube, please check it out. It is a beautiful, beautiful read. I'm going to jump back in the last questions. I hate doing this, and I know you hate this also, but you have authors and illustrators who are just starting out, and
right.
We've talked a lot about a lot of great things. If you had to give one piece of advice to someone, what would you say would be a game changer in getting into the industry of writing or illustrating?
Into the industry or writing advice, like
both, since you've given me an or.
Dang it. I made it harder on myself. So getting into the industry, I feel like it's kind of easy advice to give, but harder advice to take, which I think is true of a lot of stuff. Which is something that has always come very easily to me, that I recognize intellectually does not come easily to everyone, or very few people. This is my superpower, is fearlessness. So, you know, I think a lot of authors and illustrators have they talk to themselves, and they tell themselves that they're not good enough, or that it's not perfect enough. And I strongly believe in just putting everything out there all the time, trying to, you know, never saying this is a dumb idea. I'm just, you know, just develop it and have that curiosity for it. And that's like, that's in both publishing and in the writing process. This is the same advice, is to be, you know, or if you have fears, that's fine, but just like ignore them. Just be like, shut up, and just put it out there. I was really blessed with the ability, this sort of family trait of not having any shame. And that's awesome for me, because I will email a half-baked idea to my agent and be like, is there anything there? Like, I'm not trying to be cool. Like, it just, I am constantly, and this goes hand in hand with that is the, and I've said this a lot of times, so I apologize if anyone's hearing it more than once, is the Weeble Wobble, right? We all remember what Weeble Wobbles are. So it's like this little toy, it's like an egg, and it's weighted at the bottom, not unlike me. And if you push it, it will roll over, and then it comes right back up. So like when I get rejected for something, I'm like, okay, no, moving on to the next thing. And you just have to, you know, you can lick your wounds for like a minute, and then you have to get back up again and try something new. And that I've always done that in everything.
That's fantastic. I think that is fantastic advice. I was just seeing something recently. Sarah Millican, the comedian, the English comedian, she has this entire.
She is.
I'm gonna send you a bunch of videos when we're done. But she's a comedian. She has this great advice where she says that I think it's called Millikan's Law, which is after whatever show she's doing, she has until 11 o'clock the next morning to either lament or praise herself. And after 11 o'clock, she's on to the next thing. So she can't dwell either way in what's going on.
I think that's super good. And also, this is like one of the reasons that I forget what's in my books, because I've moved on. Like that, and having children. Like,
All right, so now I'm going to quiz you on the names of every character, and you're going to tell me who they are, which book they appeared in. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to.
No, no, God, no, I won't know.
But I do want to know. So we didn't get into this. We alluded to it at the beginning. The popularity papers are going to be seen on screens,
On
cell phone,
screen.
computer, television,
Yeah.
coming up soon. Can you give us any insider industry gossip as to what that's about?
I don't know. Okay, so this is a story. In, I think it was 2015 or 2016, we were approached by an independent producer, who had, who was legitimate and had a lot of good credits. And he said, I want to option your book. And that means he's like, I want to pay to make sure that only I can produce this for a certain amount of time, just in case anyone didn't know what an option was. I didn't going into it really. It was just like something you heard on my TV. But we're going to option it. And I was like, sure. And you've been this, if you're in this industry a long enough time, my first book was published in 2010. You hear these stories of like great books being optioned and like nothing ever happening. And that's fine because you make money off of it being optioned. And so he paid me the option for the book. And then every year he would renew the option. So I just thought that he was just going to keep giving me a little bit of money every year until one of us died. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then occasionally I get emails from the book to film agent who works in the same agency, with my literary agent, and being like, oh, stuff's happening. And I was just like, this is all Hollywood speak. So I'm ignoring it, And then we'd just like go out to sushi, like a nice dinner every time that the option got renewed. And then all of a sudden they're like, it's being made. What does that mean? And so I got to speak to the producer, and there was another producer, and it was a bunch of guys in Canada. And then I got to speak with the showrunner, and so I really don't have much of a say in how it turns out. I do know that it's going to be different from the books because of just the very nature of trying to put things in live action that, is very different from writing, an illustrated book. There's going to be ethnicities are going to be changed and plot lines are going to be changed, but hopefully they, what they're trying to do is get the basic essence of the books and the message that is put forth. So we're going to visit the set in Toronto over the summer. So that's exciting. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I feel very like I have no idea what's going on with it. It seems like very much out of my hands, and I'm just sort of watching, being like, well, that's neat that that's happening. I kind of don't know how to process it.
Well,
so I'm not. I'm ignoring it.
Do they know yet when in America? It's filming in Canada. It's a Variety said that it was a Canadian production paired with the BBC. So I'm assuming it'll be shown in Canada and the UK. What about in America?
I have no idea, and I think it has to be filmed first. But they're filming like a whole season, so it's not like just like a pilot. They're filming the whole season, and then hopefully it'll get picked up. I know that my kids watch a lot of shows that are filmed in Canada in like the same way. Just in case there are any parents out there watching Odd Squad, which is why my kids now pronounce the word odd as odd, because it's all Canadian all the time. They're like, Mommy, we want to watch Odd Squad. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. And yeah, I don't know.
If they option the Mighty Odds, you're going to have some real issues.
Oh no,
there, right?
It's the Mighty Odds.
That's fantastic.
Is it?
Is the series going to be like a series, a book, and the kids will age through? Can you give us any hints?
I think so. I mean, because it's live action, so eventually the actors will grow. But I think they're creating their own storylines, because this is how it was explained to me that there needs to be, an arc of a whole season. So it seems like it's like popularity papers, heavily flavored popularity papers, like not. I don't know how much of my own words will actually end up in it. My hope is that my philosophy ends up with it, which is that this is not a story about popularity. This is not a story where there are very clear and obvious enemies. That is something I don't like that much in books. When there's like, I mean, of course, like the Jedi Academy, there's some real enemies, but you know, Jedi Academy. But I think there are very few. I think bad people exist, but there are much fewer of them than we think. I think you just have complicated people and damaged people and people who make perhaps choices that you wouldn't want them to make. And to me, that is like the most important thing, is that you don't have like a clear antagonist. Usually people are their own antagonists enough. You don't need an external one as well.
I think that's great advice for us to end the conversation on today, and a great philosophy. So thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us. Where can people find you online if they want to know more, or if they want to cyberstalk you?
Where can they find me? I think I'm going to go to the Horticultural Society later today because the cherry blossoms are out. Oh, that wasn't what you were talking about. So online, I have a Facebook page, just my name, that I never look at, so maybe just ignore that. I also have a Twitter account, just in case you want to see, like, it's like my Twitter account is like, here's a cute thing that my kids say. Also, Slava Ukraine. Like it really, if you want to see like a lot of different viewpoints, it's gonna be
it ranges the gamut, right?
Huh?
It ranges the gamut.
I feel like I'm at the point in my career where I'm like, I'm not being careful anymore. There's too much going on in the world.
And what is your Twitter handle, so people can find you and not
It's Amy Ignatow.
Okay, I want to make sure they get
No,
you.
it's good. When your last name is Ignatow, you usually just get to keep it pretty normal. You're not fighting with anybody else for your name.
Oh, the things I will never know. But thank you.
Sorry, thanks.
It's okay. It's all right.
But it's okay, because the thing is also that if I make a mistake, it's like very easily Googleable. So I do have to be a little bit careful.
This is
it's the other Amy Ignatow.
It's the double-edged sword.
You can always say it's the other Chris.
And I frequently do. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the friends who joined us for the live conversation, and thank you to viewers in the future. Good luck on the next picture book. I can't wait to see what it is.
Yeah, we'll Symphony for a Broken Orchestra coming out at some point.
At some point, Symphony for a Broken Orchestra. Fantastic.
Probably so. I don't know. I should know. All right. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.